Doing what's generally considered the right things as a jungler just doesn't cut it. And if you're doing the wrong things, well, then you're never really going to climb, which is why in this guide, we have isolated 7 of the most important tips that will instantly fix your early game as a jungler. Now, some of the topics we're going to be covering here, we guarantee that you're going to learn something new that you will actually be able to apply in your own games. And how we know this for sure is that we're going to be using examples from brand new jungler Zot, who we are trying to get to Diamond in just 90 days to prove to you that these tips actually work, as well as what to do when everything literally goes wrong. And you can check out everything that has already got him from Bronze to Emerald with over a 60% win rate, including the full in-depth lessons, the VOD reviews, and live coaching sessions right now over at skillcap.com. And this course is still ongoing, meaning each week you're going to be able to keep up with the lessons Zot learns, the new obstacles he faces, and the progress he makes towards Diamond, as well as also giving you access to our premier 5-chapter jungling course that teaches you from start to finish everything you need to start carrying as a jungler. And the best part of it all is you can try all this out completely risk-free, since if you don't rank up while actively using SkillCap, you're going to get your money back, no questions asked. Unlock all of it right now through the discount you can only get from the link in the description below. Our first tip, it might sound a little bit basic, but don't get baited into that thought, as this is actually one of the biggest noob traps in the jungle, deciding which camp to start at level 1. As what might seem like a simple decision you make every single game actually has 4 different levels of decision making tied into it, with the 4th being a secret pathing option that almost nobody in your elo even thinks about. And why which camp you start at matters is because after a full clear, whichever side you finish on is where you're usually going to have the most free time to make plays, not only after your very first clear, but also for every clear after, making it a very, very important decision. Now, the simplest and our first level of pathing is finding your target, which just means finishing toward the lane you expect to be most volatile. For example, if bot is something like Ezreal Karma versus Lulu Jinx, but top is Renekton versus Riven, both with Ignite, you'd obviously want to path towards top. 2 melee champs, both forced to walk up, both with hard CC, meaning that lane's almost guaranteed to be explosive. So naturally, you're going to want to be around to capitalize off of that. Now, level 2 is where players fall straight into the noob trap and start making huge mistakes, because this is where things stop being so straightforward and you need to start considering other factors. So here in Zot's game, he's got a Vayne top with TP into a set with Ignite, and in bot lane, it's Neela Rakan versus not Yunara, with both supports having Ignite. So here's the question, where would you path towards? Because I guarantee most players are going to get this completely wrong. But first, let's listen into Zot's thought process here.
Alright, I have a Vayne top. Vayne top is like very annoying. So you know this Echo is going to path towards her, so I probably should path towards her as well, just so she can play the game.
In theory, it all sounds pretty logic. Vayne, as a ranged top, should naturally end up pushing, so his goal is to path up there and make sure she's able to do just that. And I'm guessing that is exactly what most of you watching would have done as well, right? Well, there's a massive flaw in that logic if you want to climb. What if the enemy jungler just doesn't path up there? Or even just sees you in the river, recalls, and goes to bot scuttle? Zot's entire plan this game is to path towards a lane he already knows he can't actually gank, as Vayne will not only be permanently pushing, but also has 0 reliable setup. And this is where so many junglers go wrong. You'll look at a lane like Vayne versus Set and think, I have to path top. If I don't, she's just gonna run it down and go 0-20. Sure, she might do that, but she might also drop a ward and know how to play safe. The reality is, this isn't smart pathing, it's self-griefing. Whereas on the flip side, if we think about bot lane this game, Neela Rakan not only have amazing setup and follow-up, but with Neela's short range, there is a very good chance she's going to get pushed in, meaning ganks will have a much higher success rate. Just imagine if Zot had path bot and was there for this play. So, stop overthinking it. It's honestly as simple as just pathing toward the lane that you think is going to have the highest chance of giving you kills. That is it. But level 3 is where things really start to get tricky, and that is playing around the enemy jungler. Because if you know this tip, and you're always pathing toward the most volatile lane, then guess what? There's going to be a good chance that enemy jungler probably knows it too. And that is where the doubt creeps in. You start thinking things like, wait, what if I'm on the weaker jungler here? What if we lose the 2v2 or the 3v3? Or maybe what if they can test me at Scuttle? Be honest. How many times have you avoided pathing towards the obvious lane just because you were worried about being on a weaker early game jungler? That fear is real and is something every single jungler honestly struggles with. And Zot had this exact concern in this week's lesson.
Okay, so what if I'm like playing something weak early, like a Mumu, and they have some strong jungler like Lee Sin? Should I still path towards that lane?
What are you worried about? That he's going up there too and you lose?
Yeah, like what if we meet at Scuttle and I just lose that Scuttle automatically? Or if I go up there and we 2v2, we just lose that 2v2?
In low elo, this doesn't matter and you shouldn't worry about it. So there's two outcomes. One, because of our first lesson, you get there first, so you get to the gank faster. So it doesn't matter that he's stronger because he's like bad and he doesn't know how to clear. Or if he is there, let's say he just knows how to clear, and you just walk away and you don't really have to worry about it too much.
Okay. I mean, I still feel like it's bad pathing up there. I'm just gonna die, but I mean, I'll try it.
Yep.
And truthfully, well, as you heard, Zot didn't really like that advice, which makes sense. Our brains, they are hardwired to remember that one disastrous counter gank where you get double killed and your laner instantly starts flaming you for it. Meanwhile, the 10 times you just walk top, grab a kill and leave, well, that barely even registers. It just feels like business as usual. And for junglers, that trap is even worse because your mental game is already getting worn down every single game by teammates spamming pings, demanding ganks, and blaming you for every lost lane. So when that one bad counter gank happens, it cuts even deeper. But that is honestly exactly why this mindset is so dangerous. It makes you play scared and it makes you play hesitant instead of playing for the highest percentage win condition like we talked about. And thankfully, what Zot found from actually playing this week and following this advice was that it honestly wasn't wrong at all. See, low elo junglers, they run into problems in these losing matchups because more often than not, they always get to the play far too slow. They get to Scuttle as the enemy's jungler's already there and lose the 1v1, but they don't have priority from their laners. Or they show up in lane late, which massively increases the chance of walking straight into a bad 2v2 or getting counter ganked. Take a game like this for example. Zot pathed towards top as he knew the Quinn would be bullying Mundo pretty badly, making her a prime target for him to gank. But with the enemy jungler being Neferi, there's no way he would ever win that 2v2, let alone would he have ever have priority for Scuttle, especially considering his mid was somehow solo killed by a level 3 Vlad. But how Zot's managed to see massive results in avoiding all of these issues is that above all else, he is focused on just improving his clear speed. So much so in fact, that he's able to walk to top, gank the Quinn, and score a kill before Neferi has even finished her Krugs, which then even allows him to get a kill on Neferi and pick up the Scuttle right after, despite the heavily losing 2v2 that many junglers would shy away from towards. And all of this is because the single biggest advantage you can create for yourself as a jungler in the early game, and the singular thing you're 100% in control of, is your clear speed. That is why we built our jungle clear course, which is guaranteed to speed up your clear by around 10 to 20 seconds compared to the average player in your elo. That means you're going to be getting to your laners or even setting up at Scuttle while your opponents are still clearing their last few camps, featuring the absolute fastest possible clears for all meta champions done by world record holder Shapeshift, teaching you tips and tricks that even many challenger junglers still don't even know about to this day, and with step-by-step subtitles you can follow along with easily and master every detail until you're literally the fastest clearer in the world on your chosen champion. But with even all of that said, there is still one more level to pathing, and that is the secret level 4 option. And this is the one almost nobody in your elo ever even considers. Yet it is so powerful that it can literally flip a game with 0 obvious lanes to gank into a win condition that snowballs. Take this game. Zot's got an Enchanter versus Enchanter bot lane, and top is Singed versus Cho'Gath. Not exactly the most explosive matchup here, though Singed does have some decent gank setup, at least when he's not off doing whatever it is Singed players do. So why does Zot still path bot though? If you remember back to one of our past episodes, we stressed the importance of being at your camps immediately as they respawn. And if you're getting to either your Gromp or your Krubs at 420, then clearing down, you end up finishing your bot quadrant just shortly after the 5-minute mark, which means, you guessed it, you can transition straight into an early Drake. And here's the crazy part about that. Most enemy junglers and even laners aren't even thinking about Dragon this early on in the game, especially if the enemy jungler decided to path to top instead, as they're going to be stuck clearing their top quadrant while you're on Drake. So in slower, more passive games, which is typically the case if there's no good lane for you to path towards, this early Drake stacking can literally turn into a game-deciding win condition. But one of the biggest lessons Zot has drilled into his brain so far on his journey to Diamond is this: you should only ever look to gank if you're at least 80% confident that you're gonna secure a kill. We stressed this back in episode 1, where we literally gave you the math behind a gank, needing to have at least an 80% success rate just to break even with farming 2 camps. Yet this is still where so many junglers just absolutely go wrong. You're gonna see your laner spam pinging for help and feel obligated to go and assist them, even if there's a pretty slim chance that you're gonna get a kill. And that single mistake right there can end up costing you games fully. Before continuing though, we really want to make it clear that this is technically not how challenger players would play in their own elo. In higher elo brackets, going for ganks with only like a 50 to 60% chance of a kill happening is totally going to be fine. And that's because even if you don't score a kill, having good and capable teammates means that at the very least, they're going to use the pressure of your gank to gain some sort of advantage in some way. Perhaps that gank is going to let them get priority so they can invade the enemy jungler with you, or maybe move first to objectives. Maybe it allows them to get a good recall timer, which they're then going to use to come back to lane to build a massive lead. Or maybe they take that damage and the favorable lane state you've given them and convert it into a solo kill later down the line. But let's be real here for a second. In your games, you could gank somebody 5 times in 5 minutes, get your laner ridiculously far ahead, and yet somehow they are still going to find a way to throw their lane anyway. It's just the reality of it. This is why in your elo, trying to help or play for advantages through your teammates is pointless, and it's just going to leave you frustrated in the long run. And if you're serious about climbing, the only reason you should ever look to gank a lane is with the goal of putting yourself ahead by scoring a kill. Now, what I'm about to say, it might sound a little bit weird, but when it comes to ganking, wards, they really don't matter, even half as much as you think they do. And we're going to show you exactly why that is. From what we've seen, junglers knowing there's a ward around is ironically going to be more effective at stopping a gank than that ward itself. It sounds a little bit crazy, but it makes sense. We're conditioned nonstop about how wasting time is the ultimate sin. So the second we see or even suspect a ward, that lane instantly drops to the bottom of our priority list. And I'm sure we've all had that one time where you've sat in a bush waiting for the perfect moment to gank, only then to find out you were standing on a ward the entire time. But here's the truth. A ward by itself, it doesn't stop your gank. What actually decides whether a gank will work is where the enemy laner is standing when they see you. Envision a lane split into 3 zones here: the danger zone, the even zone, and the safe zone. If you're ganking a lane where they're pushed up into the danger zone, common ward spots like Try or the Pixel Brush don't actually matter at all, as even if they're able to react to you immediately, if you walk with the intent of cutting them off, you're gonna always be able to catch them. Like here, Zot heads toward top for a gank as Mord is edging into the danger zone, and despite there being a ward in the Pixel Brush, even if Mord spots Zot immediately, it doesn't really matter. And this is where so many junglers throw away free kills. Instead of just walking in and ganking in a situation like this, they're gonna stop after sweeping and spend time clearing that ward. Clearing vision, it feels good, but in the danger zone, it is a complete waste. When it comes to the even zone though, wards begin to matter just a little bit more, but not nearly as much as you would think though. So in lower elos, you don't need me to tell you that player map awareness is absolutely terrible. Even if they drop a ward, they're still gonna need to actually notice you, process what's happening, and react almost immediately to back off in time. And most of the time, they just don't. Depending on where their ward is placed and how you approach the lane, you're gonna be shocked at how often you're gonna get away with just ganking on full vision. And if your laner has strong setup or they're already mid-fight, that tiny reaction window basically disappears, which means even in the even zone, you can often just ignore the ward and pull off the gank anyway. And then there's the safe zone. Sure, there are a few niche cases here where something like a sneaky lane gank, like we see Zot doing here, or a well-timed counter gank can really work out. But in general, you should should never be pathing toward a lane that's sitting in the safe zone. So, despite wards obviously being most effective here, they're kind of still irrelevant anyway, as you shouldn't be heading towards that lane to begin with. And so, there is actually an amazing way of knowing in advance when laners are going to be entering that danger zone. You've probably already heard how important understanding wave control can be as a jungler. And from what we've seen, our subscribers, they kind of tend to fall into two camps here. They either know nothing about wave control at all, seeing it as it's not their problem and something for laners to deal with, or they know a lot about it. Zot was in that second camp. He knew a lot. He understood wave control thanks to his Bronze to Diamond ADC challenge. But like many players, didn't know what actually matters for a jungler. Well, other than he needs to take his ADC's entire wave to encourage him to come help at Dragon.
I'm so evil, look.
Oh my god, I would have AFK'd if I'm Twitch.
Yeah, but it's to incentivize him going to the dragon, okay? Because otherwise he would have had to clear that wave. I'm so evil, actually, because if someone did that to me, I'd be so upset.
Yeah,
like, I would
AFK
AFK
it.
it. Yeah, I would as well. He died for it as well.
Yeah, Zot deserves to be banned. But anyway, we're going to teach you exactly what matters and show you how it can take your jungling to the next level by allowing you to spot ganks in advance. Now, first off, this might seem a little bit obvious, but it's super important here. You're going to see why in just a second. You need to understand the difference between a neutral wave and a pushing wave. A neutral wave is when the minions are even and the lane is stuck right in the middle, that even zone we spoke about just a second ago. Now, on the other hand, a pushing wave is when one side has more minions, which means the wave is slowly shoving towards the enemy tower until it eventually crashes. And it's during that timer, while the wave is pushing, that the enemy is at their most vulnerable, as that lane is eventually going to hit the danger zone. And they have to push further up to last hit, and they can't base without losing CS, and that is exactly why ganks here are so much more successful. And the two ways you can predict that window in advance is by first using something called the even minion rule. Now, all this means is when two equal waves meet, the wave closer to its own tower will always win out and start pushing back. So just by glancing at these waves, you can already start to predict in advance when that laner will be vulnerable. Like here in Zot's game, going by the minimap, you would typically think ganking top would be a complete waste of time. But Zot pans his camera to the wave, and as we now know, due to the even minion rule, this is going to push back to Renekton once the next wave comes in from base, putting him on a very short timer to get there. So he quickly smites his Gromp to make sure he's there for that window and picks up the free kill on K'Sante while he's stuck trying to crash the wave. The second way for you to identify this window is even easier though, and we can see it in action just a few minutes later in this very same game. Renekton crashes the wave into the turret and then bases. This causes what's known as a rebound, and will mean the wave will slowly begin to push back to him. K'Sante then gets back into lane and continues building a slow push. Meanwhile, Zot is about to enter his top quadrant, which, as we touched on in last week's episode, means that if he starts, he should commit to clearing fully before thinking about ganking. Now, this is where, as a jungler, these tips and having a basic understanding of wave control can really gain you an edge. As if K'Sante had instead decided to fast push, Zot could just skip his quadrant, run straight to top, and then get an easy gank while K'Sante is stuck trying to clear the next wave, before going back to his quadrant right after. But as K'Sante instead opts to slow push, Zot knows he has just under 30 seconds until that next minion wave arrives, giving him enough time to commit to clearing his quadrant, moving straight to top after to catch K'Sante trying to crash the wave yet again for another easy gank. Oh, and by the way, remember how we said wards don't really matter? Well, Zot just so happened to be on a ward the entire time, and yet this gank was still successful, as due to the wave, K'Sante has no choice but to try and crash it before he resets. And something you probably heard from coaches or other educational content out there is that as a jungler, you should never gank a losing lane. This advice is actually one of the biggest lies holding junglers like you back from climbing, as truthfully, in most cases, you should do the complete opposite. Now, in theory, this rule all makes a lot of sense here, and we see it happen in pro play all the time, with some games even having the entire map split in half, also the jungler can just focus around playing and supporting the winning lane or strong side of the map. And why playing around winning lanes is so effective in higher elo to begin with is all because laners have a much better understanding of how to leverage that lead. They know when they can play aggressive. They understand when to play safe to avoid ganks. They know when they should be pushing for priority. And most importantly, out of all of that, they know how to leverage that lead to work together with you to impact the map together. But in reality, how it actually goes for you at your elo is that you're going to camp bot lane, get them super far ahead, and still somehow they're always the last to move to Drake. Or you're going to get your top laners super far ahead, only to have them just throw it all away, split pushing and dying over and over and over again to the most obvious collapses, which is why putting all your eggs in one singular basket, let alone allowing that basket to be held by your solo queue teammate, is undoubtedly some of the worst advice you could ever hear from climbing on jungle. Now, on the flip side, think of what happens to your losing lanes. Well, for starters, they're obviously more than likely going to be getting pushed in, typically resulting in your opponent often being further up in the lane and in that danger zone, giving you a higher chance of that gank succeeding. Second, their lane opponent knows they're stronger. And what's the one way most players think you extend that lead? Spoiler, it's not using that priority to help the jungler. For the vast majority of laners, the only way they get to know how to push an advantage is by trying to get more kills. Like here in one of Zot's games, where his brand top is losing pretty badly to a Shen. And by the time Zot finishes his topside jungle, the wave is in the even zone and pushing away from Brand. But as this is a losing lane, Zot knows this Shen will be looking for any opportunity he can to fight Brand with his lead. So he pings the Brand walks up, Shen takes the bait, and Zot picks up a big shutdown. Now, while it's obviously good to play around winning lanes, in theory, your goal, again, should always be to try and get yourself as fed as possible. And if that means spam gank and losing lanes, so be it. It all goes back to that 80% rule that we covered a lot earlier in this lesson. And yes, hold on, before you go to the comments and type, "Thanks, Skillcapped, I just followed your terrible advice and got 1v2'd by a Darius and demoted to Iron." Of course, there's always the risk of getting 1v2'd, or even 2v2'd by the enemy jungler when you gank a losing lane. And sure, that's partly the reason you hear the rule in the first place. But once again, you're letting that risk turn into fear. And if you default into a scared mentality in League, always convincing yourself every gank on a losing lane is doomed before you even attempt it, and just focusing on the worst thing that could happen, you're going to miss out on so many free kills. It is this simple. If you don't believe you can 1v1 the enemy laner, or you know your teammate won't be able to contribute enough and you're worried, then fine, just don't risk it. And all this should go without saying here, you're never looking to take 2v2s with your losing lane, or to even play around them with the intent of getting them back in the game. Remember what we said earlier. You're just using them being behind to help yourself pick up free kills. So if you know the enemy jungler is around, again, just don't risk it. So at this point in this course, we have spoke so much about the when to gank that we haven't even touched on the how to gank. Pay close attention to this clip here though, and see if you can guess what Jarvan did wrong here. Even despite Zot picking up a kill, this was actually one of the most common mistakes that we see junglers make every single game. In a gank, you're going to typically only get a single rotation of your abilities off, especially the longer ones. Whether or not you use your abilities at the start of the gank or at the end of the gank, it doesn't really change the amount of damage that you're going to deal. But what it does change is how your opponents are able to respond to the spells you use. So take this gank here. Vex and Talia are both fighting mid, with Zot sneaking into the mid bush undetected, and then the moment Talia gets in range, he sends his EQ, which she then flashes, and now there is zero kill potential. This is why, when looking to gank, you should consider two things. First is your approach and the direction or even the angle that you're coming from. As if you're ever able to reach your target without having to use any of your abilities to do so, this is always going to make your ganks way more effective. And the second is what options they have to escape your gank. So that's things like their flash cooldown, which unless you know for certain is down, you should assume is up. Things like crowd control, like Syndra E or Hwei EQ, or just mobility tools like Ezreal's E, for example. Like here, Zot is able to flank behind bot lane where both could have flash available. So he makes sure to hold on to his E the entire time and just walk up to them instead. That way, the second the Smolder flashes and tries to E away, Zot can match that with his own mobility, leaving them absolutely no room to escape. So, going back to that clip we showed at the very start here, if Zot had understood that concept earlier, he could have simply just changed the angle he approached in, which would in turn cut Yunara off until he's in range to land the slow from his W, at which point he could just start autoing her, and that way, even if she's still flashed, he could follow with EQ for an easy kill, forcing that flash and holding his own. Now, fortunately though, with how he played it, Zot was lucky enough to have his flash up to follow Yunara. Otherwise, if he didn't, she would have escaped for free. Now, the main reason all of this matters is because unsuccessful ganks are far worse than you've probably ever realized they are. On the surface, it feels like it's no big deal. You didn't get the kill, but hey, at least you helped your lane out, right? Well, wrong. A failed gank can be one of the most punishing mistakes you can make as a jungler. And honestly, for reasons that you probably haven't even ever heard or considered, but can end up single-handedly costing costing you the entire game. The first and most obvious reason, though, is really simple. You're just wasting time. Think about what that actually looks like, though. You spend a few seconds leaving your jungle, and you just walk into the lane. A few more seconds waiting for the perfect moment, then the time spent actually executing the gank that didn't succeed. Then, once it's over, you still have to walk away and find a good place to reset. Not too close, though, because you don't want to get stopped on your base. So you go a little bit further back, just in case. But just like that, you ended up wasting well over an entire minute of time, which, as you already know from episode 1, can then cause a knock-on effect, as you're going to be delaying re-clearing your camps, falling behind in XP, and just generally being behind in tempo. But it's not just your own time that you're wasting here. There's often other costs associated with it too. Every second you spend on a failed gank gives the enemy jungler a window to make plays elsewhere on the map. They can freely walk into your jungle and steal away any camps you left up, or they can use that time to secure free objectives on the opposite side of the map. But there's even another hidden opportunity cost that almost no junglers ever even consider, and it happens every game right under your nose, and can actually get your laners killed. This is because the moment you show on the map for a gank, every other enemy laner on the map gets the green light to play aggressive. They know exactly where you are, which means they can safely force trades. They can even look for an all-in. And the higher ranks you climb, the more dangerous this becomes, as good players will instantly recognize that window and punish your teammates because of it. So, unless you are certain a gank has at least an 80% chance of success, it's often far more effective to just keep on farming, wait for that right opportunity to present itself. And I get it. We've all had those games where you feel pressured to do something. You have that urge, so you force a gank you already know probably ain't gonna work out. But ultimately, that's exactly the trap you want to avoid if you're serious about climbing. And if you really are, then you're gonna want to check out our Bronze to Diamond course over at skillcap.com. That is where you can get full access to every in-depth lesson covered in this entire episode, plus all the ones that have already taken Zot up to Emerald so far. And the best part, you're gonna even get access to next week's lessons before anybody else, so you can stay a full step ahead on your climb. Check out the link in the description below for an exclusive one-time discount code. All right, and that will do it for this one. We here at Skill Cap want to thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.